Good morning. Welcome to this meeting of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs for the 2025 legislative session. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Carter.
Present.
DeLong.
Present.
De Silva.
Here.
Edgeworth.
Present.
Flanagan.
Here.
Gallant.
Here.
Goulding.
Here.
Burr.
Here.
Hunt.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Karras.
Present.
Kasama. Wynn.
Here.
Chair Considine.
I am present. Please record Assemblymember Kasama present when she arrives. Welcome to the audience in Carson City, those joining by video conference in Las Vegas, and those listening over the internet. I'd like to begin with some housekeeping measures. First, please silence your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. When testifying at the table, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name and any affiliation for the record. Turn the microphone off each time you are done speaking. If you're providing handouts, please ensure that hard copies are available for members of the public. Electronic copies should be submitted to our committee manager by 9 a.m. the previous day for committee members. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we disagree with someone else's position. I encourage committee members to ask questions and engage with the material presented. If you have any follow-up questions, please flag them for me so that we can ensure we balance our time effectively during the meetings. Committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and other documents. Please do not interpret this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. And with that, it's Monday. Let's get started. Today we will hear one presentation followed by two bills. For our presentation, we will hear from the Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security within the Office of the Military. Afterwards, we will hear Assembly Bill 41, which revises provisions relating to the state militia, and AB 81, which exempts the state of Nevada from provisions of federal law relating to daylight savings time. With several items on the agenda today, I want to ensure that we get through everyone fairly and in a timely manner. For the bill hearings, we will set a 20-minute time limit for each period of support, opposition, and neutral testimony, with each speaker having 2 minutes. To start, we will begin with the Division of Emergency Management, Homeland Security. First, we have Brent Compston, Administrator of the Division of Emergency Management, and Sharon Luce, Deputy Administrator, here to present. Welcome, and please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair, Committee. My name is Brett Compson. I am the Chief at the Division of Emergency Management. And today with me I have Ms. Sharon Luce, who is in Southern Nevada as the Deputy Administrator, and Mr. Jared Franco, who is my Chief Financial Officer. So, go back. What I wanted to open with was our purpose, our reason for being. So the reason that the division exists is to help people. It's to help people prepare for emergencies and disasters. It's to help people respond to emergencies and disasters, and it's to help Nevada recover from emergencies and disasters. This is the litmus test in everything that we do, every decision we make, and every program that we run. Next slide. What I wanted to share with you today was the historical threats. Those are on the left side of the slide before you. I'm assuming that you all have the slides available. So these are threats that we are familiar with. It's floods, it's earthquakes, it's wildfire. These are very common in Nevada. But what I wanted to do is spend a little bit of time talking about the items on the right. So these are the things that scare me. These are the things that keep me up at night. And as I'll share with you, I recently retired out of the National Guard, and so I bring a little bit of a DOD flavor with me to the chief's position. And so what scares me the most is a long-term outage of critical infrastructure, whether this is power, fuel, communications, water, or logistics. I think that this could happen to the state in one of two ways. I think that this could happen through a kinetic means or a cyber means, which would be a nation-state threat. And really what I'm referring to is if China were to make a move on Taiwan, really all we have to do, or all China has to do, is delay the U.S. military from deploying from the West Coast. And as we know, most of the resources, including our critical infrastructure, that we receive comes out of California. So any impacts in California will be regional impacts here in Nevada. The other way that I think this could happen is through a catastrophic regional earthquake, predominantly in California. And so the one I'll reference for my discussion today is if we had a Southern California catastrophic earthquake in which the Cajon Pass was severed and all the lifelines that we receive from Southern Nevada, or from Southern California, were severed as well. In these scenarios, we were looking at somewhere between 6 weeks to multiple months without critical infrastructure. Now, that's hard to imagine. Most of us go hours sometimes without power, maybe in a few cases days. I don't think any of us in any of our lifetimes have really thought about a period in which we have 30 or 60 days without power, without cell phone. This is something scary. And so these are the things that are going to drive the actions that I take and the time that I spend as the administrator and where we head take the division. The other things that really stress me out is the Tahoe Basin fire. So I was serving in the National Guard and ended up in the Emergency Operations Center leading that effort on the day in which we had to evacuate South Lake Tahoe during the Caldor fire. This is not a position I ever want to be in again. We have limited access, limited routes in and out, and we have a heavily burdened fire load in the Tahoe Basin. And the last is extreme weather events. Such items such as Hurricane Hillary in Southern Nevada. Whoever thought we would have a hurricane in Nevada. Avalanches in Southern Nevada. And now lithium fires on the freeways. Slide. So up front, the operating environment in which the division finds itself today. Right now, we serve as the hub and spoke operation, essentially at state government, synchronizing and coordinating state resources and response to emergencies. We serve as the governor's ability to monitor, predict, and decide, and my intent is to stay left of bang or left of an event. Our intent is to be able to provide the governor the opportunity to have decisions to synchronize and respond before an emergency happens. And so to do that, we spend a lot of time monitoring the environment and trying to make good assessments on what's coming before it gets here. The emergency management and the Homeland Security environment is no longer just a post-event or recovery and grants agency. So I know in our long history, we served multiple different facets, and really there was a period in which we really served mostly as a pass-through for federal grant funds. I think that is probably 45% of what we do now, and 55% of what we do is build resilience in the state of Nevada to prepare the state to be able to respond to emergencies and disasters. As I mentioned earlier, there is an increasing number of numbers and variances of emergencies, blizzards, lithium fires, hurricanes in Nevada, pandemic, heat. These are all relatively new to us in the state of Nevada. And of course, the last one I list here is the national security emergency, which is a real possibility within the next 5 years to have a nation-state conflict. I do not think that we in the state of Nevada or as a nation are completely prepared for that, the consequences of that. We do still continue to serve as a vehicle for federal funds to transition from the state to locals. And the most, newest item here on the list is the last one. The governor is proposing that to move the division to an office within the governor's office. So, next slide. What I want to walk you through is I broke it down in the areas within my mission. So first we prepare for. And so really this comes down to we will never be able to build a resilient Nevada during the aftermath of a disaster. We have to build a resilient Nevada before disaster strikes. So we do this through really two mechanisms, preparedness. And preparedness is focused on our first responders. It's focused on our emergency managers and our Homeland Security enterprise. This is the training that first responders receive. This is the FEMA programs that we participate in. This is everything related to how those that respond to emergencies are prepared to do that. But I think probably more important is this resilience element. So this resilience element is really how do we prepare communities to help take care of themselves? How do we coordinate with all of our partners? How do we synchronize with stakeholders? The state of Nevada is not going to solve an emergency. It is not going to make everything better. Mostly that will happen through volunteer organizations. It will happen through community organizations. It will happen through public and private partnerships. We serve as a linchpin to help coordinate that, and building those relationships before times of disaster is essential. We also do radiological preparedness and support that within the state of Nevada. So how do we respond? Well, obviously, I think everyone's received alert on their phone, and so public information and warning is essential. We also serve or provide a duty officer program. So I have someone on 24/7, 365 that receives calls for search and rescue, floods, train derailment, take your pick of disasters, and it's our job to, or those folks' job to coordinate the response for state agencies. We also operate an emergency operations center, and we assist locals when they request assistance with incident management. Slide. So recovery. So there's a couple different facets here. So recovery really is one of those things that's, we need disasters to receive presidential declarations, to receive funding to continue to feed the program. So right now we have 3 open disasters, floods from 2017, COVID, and the atmospheric river from a couple of years ago. And so those COVID funds are about to expire. And so we use the management costs from those presidential disasters to retain our recovery capability. The people that go out after a disaster and do the assessments, determine how much was damaged, how are we gonna apply for assistance from FEMA. And so this is a challenge for us because we don't want presidentially declared disasters, because that means we have huge problems here in the state. But we need them to continue to exist. And so that's kind of a quagmire here. Next slide. All right, and everything is underwritten by grants. So within the Division of Emergency Management, I have 12 major grant programs, totaling about $297 million that we're managing right now, over 796 open awards. You can see the list of some of the major grants that are listed on the slide. And public information and communications. This is an essential part of what the division does. So as we've recently seen in the Cybertruck fire at the Trump Towers, and we watched how Chief McMahill communicated with the public, clearly, succinctly, transparently. This is the thing that we want to do here at the state in every communication that we have in an emergency. We don't want to speculate. We do not want to pontificate. We want to simply be able to feed the public the necessary information they need to know. We all know that there are 2 sides to an emergency, or to emergency communications. So there is what is really happening and what the public believes is happening. And our job is to try to keep the public informed in a timely manner to ensure that they do not fill in the gaps with their own stories, but that we are able to keep them confident in what is happening from their government, and we can keep them informed and help them guide how they personally respond. Next slide. So I wanted to share with you some of the things that your division has done for you in the last 2 years. This is a laundry list of the different types of emergencies that we have dealt with over the last in 23 and 24. And you'll notice on the top right of that slide, 358 calls. So my duty officers are responding to something essentially every other day. 17 activations over the last 2 years. So the division has been busy. Slide. So the division manages 10 public bodies, 8 which are mandated by NRS or developed by the governor, and 2 that I have developed myself. These are the ones that are available. Slide. So challenges. So I would say that the division is new again. So the division has experienced 81% turnover since 2020 and COVID when it started. That is an astronomical number. We're at about 46% that are either new or within 1 year of their position they moved within the division. This might be for a number of different reasons, predominantly natural retirements that have occurred, and I think a lot of burnout that occurred post-COVID. And so in many ways, we are a division that is new again. We are in the business of retraining. Many of these grants that we manage take years to become an authority on those grants. And so it's going to take us time to get to the point where we are, where I believe that we should be. So with the transition of this number of people, it affects our downstream services. So it affects our customer service, it affects our experience base, and so this just takes time to retrain. We've realized that we need to retrain our emergency operations center personnel, and so we've initiated an 8-month retraining process for all personnel that work within the emergency operations center to culminate in August. We know that there's an increased demand for information and synchronization, in particular from the governor. And as far as modernized technology, I think we're operating at about 2015. We have a patchwork of different programs that don't talk to each other. And so my goal over the next 5 years is to bring that all together so that it is synchronized from front to back. And that's everything from when you go to our webpage, you can pull up your most recent history. If you're a county or local, you can see all your declarations, you can see all your grants, you can see current status, who last touched it within my office, that we have the ability to manage interactions on a customer service module on the backside, as well as utilizing technologies and skills that have recently emerged within the last couple of years to allow us to monitor the environment, to identify when emergencies happen, to help us make decisions and prepare for emergencies and respond to those emergencies. And the last item is we are heavily reliant on federal funds. As I'm sure all of us have watched the news over the last several weeks, there's a large discussion ongoing at the national level about what will emergency management look like in the future. And I believe that we are going to be postured in the state of Nevada to lead a transition in emergency management. Right now, we rely approximately on $7.1 million of federal funds to run just the division. That does not count the $22.7 million that I'm passing through on average per year to our local agencies to augment their programs. And so I believe that we will lead a transition in emergency management over the next several years here in the division. Next slide. So what are my walkways? What I hope that you walk away from here today with? State funds matter. Like I said, we are heavily reliant on federal funds at this point, and I do believe that emergency management will transition in some way, shape, or form nationally. The emergency management and homeland security environment has changed. And at this point, we need to be preparing Nevada forward. We cannot be a response agency. We cannot try to put our stuff together during the midst of a recovery. We're seeing how this is working in California right now. We have got to be ahead of bang. DM serves as a state coordination hub, synchronizing state assets and resources. But as I said, the state will not solve emergency problems. The state will help synchronize assets and resources for emergencies. It will be our communities, it will be our volunteers, it will be our public-private partnerships that make things better. And the division is new again. We are rebuilding and we are retraining. So there's a photo here in the bottom right-hand side. This photo was taken on Mount Rose Highway after the Davis fire. A local put this up and one of my staff took this photo. And so what you'll see in this photo is you see federal assets, you see state assets, and you see local assets all listed on this board. This is not something I have seen in my 15 years of association with the division through National Guard operations or actually being here in the division. This is exactly where I want to be. This is exactly where I want to be. I want the division and all assets to respond, to do it holistically, together, and to do it as partners. Thank you for your time. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We do have some questions. Our first question comes from Assembly Member Goulding.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, and more importantly, thank you for all that you do. That 91% turnover number is really startling. What do you have in the works to ensure retention?
Yep. So, Brett Thompson for the record. It's a great question. 81% turnover since 2020. That is a huge number. And coming from a military background, culture is everything. Culture is absolutely everything. I am happy to report that as of today, when I showed up, we had 12 vacancies. We are now down to 1. And everything that I do, every effort that I spend in my first year is really mostly directed inward. I think that the chief before me did an admirable job in building relationships with our locals. Absolutely critical. But I think that the attention that is needed inside the division to build a culture, to build an environment where people choose to stay, they want to stay, is the greatest contribution I can make immediately. And so that's where we started. That's where I'm spending my efforts. Like I said, I'm extremely proud to report that we're down to 1, and I'm pretty sure I can fill that 1 pretty quick. So now I have to build time, or build the team. And it goes back to what I talked about. It comes back to training. It comes back to giving them resources. It comes back to empowering them. And it comes back to giving them the authority to make decisions at the level where the information sits. Very rarely should I have to make a decision unless it is a high-risk decision or a very high-level decision. Most of the times those decisions should be within the division, and that is a transition in our culture.
Thank you. Chair, one more question. You talked about needing to modernize your equipment. Do you have an idea of what that costs, that will cost?
I don't. The reality is what I'm talking about, or what I referenced here, is our software systems. So we have a patchwork of systems. We have a system that runs emergency operations documentation. We have different systems that run our grants. We have different systems, state systems that run our fiscal side. Our website's not connected to any of those. All those things need to be tied together. I do not have a number. It's going to take really probably 2 bienniums to come here and ask to do that in a synchronized and planned way. In no way, shape, or form I will break the division if I just say change everything today. But we can't wait to start doing that. And so in my budget, I have asked for, I think, $120,000 per year for a first set of technologies. And then I will come back in the next 2 bienniums to ask for more as we build that in a synchronized way. I don't know the number though.
Thank you for that question. Just as a reminder, the Government Affairs Committee is a policy committee. We typically don't talk about funding, which goes through Ways and Means. And our next question is from Vice Chair Nguyen.
Thank you very much for being here, and again, thank you for your service, Colonel. Having that discussion you said earlier, and I know that the chair just said we shouldn't talk about the money committee, but just curious on a percentage of your budget. You said earlier that $7 million come from federal grant, and then you have a $22 million pass through. What is the percentage of that on your total budget?
Brett Thompson for the record. I don't know the percentage of what goes to the state versus what passes through. I know it's approximately 96% of my budget is federally funded.
96%, you said?
6.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is.
And just quick follow-up. And how does moving the operation under, the governor's office, how does that benefit you or change things operationally?
Brett Thompson for the record. So I can actually, this is a really easy question for me. So I semi-assumed the role as the administrator or the chief on 9/11 in the midst of the Davis fire, when the previous chief had to step out for a family emergency. And I officially took it in November. And so since 9/11, we have been operating, although I report to General Waters in the Office of the Military, operationally, I am reporting directly to the governor and have been since September. What this has allowed us to do is it allows me to coordinate with the entire cabinet and predominantly the agencies that are involved in emergency response in a very quick, a very efficient, and a very operational manner. And so it allows, I guess it really comes down to operational control. I'm able to feed the governor directly, I'm able to give him suggestions, and he's able to make decisions predominantly before we get into the point where it's a crisis situation and after the fact. So it's really more about operational coordination than anything else.
Thank you. And our next question is from Assemblymember De Silva.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Colonel Compson and Mr. Lewis for being here today and for your continued service. I just have a quick, essentially a two-part question. One is about cybersecurity. I was wondering if you could go a little bit deeper into some of the threats that we are facing as a state. Are most of the threats coming from within the state, or maybe from outside of the state, or maybe outside of the even country? And then secondly, fuel disruptions. I know that's something that's a hot topic, especially in my part of town, where we have fewer gas stations per capita. So my question is, how dependent are we upon extra Nevada, outside of Nevada fuel sources? Thank you.
Brett Thompson for the record. In regards to your first question, cybersecurity. So I'm not a cybersecurity expert. The cybersecurity experts here in the state of Nevada, at least within the executive branch, are the OCIO, Office of Chief Information Officer. And so I do not have any cybersecurity experts other than the people that take care of my own. Where the division does fit in, and what I can share with you, is that in the event of a large-scale cyber emergency, the division would use our emergency authorities, and we would use our emergency funds to support any augmentation to OCIO's efforts. So I can't speak to where the threats best come from or don't come from, whether they're external to the state, internal to the state. I just am not in a position to be able to give you an informed answer on that, but I can tell you how the division participates in that, or we would participate in a large-scale event of that nature. And to your second question, I can speak to this well. So fuel disruptions. So whether this occurs from a wildfire in Southern California, in which the facility that pumps gas through the Kinder Morgan pipeline to Southern Nevada is disrupted, like we just experienced, or whether it is from a cyber event, or whether it's from an earthquake, it doesn't matter. The results are the same. We have a limited amount of storage within particularly Southern Nevada area, and the same thing goes here for Northern Nevada as well. And most of our fuel comes through pipelines from California. So at any point in which we experience a fuel disruption from power outages or whatever those reasons might be, there will be consequences in the state of Nevada. And so that's where I talk about this resilience piece and how do we prepare the state of Nevada? Do we increase our storage? Do we build redundancies in power with our partners in California? What are the ways in which we limit the fuel disruptions? Can you imagine, and I did for about half a day last month when the fires broke out in California and the pipeline was down and we knew we had about 2 days of gas left and it was going to be 4 days before the power got turned on. That's a very hard scenario and a very small version of the 6 weeks to 60 days that I talked about earlier. We aren't prepared for that, and we need to become prepared for that. To that end, we are starting a fuel disruption study. The governor commissioned that during the last Homeland Security Commission, and so that will be underway as soon as the BRIC grant is re-released by FEMA. They recently pulled that back, I believe, last week or the week before. So.
Thank you. And just a quick question, since you mentioned it, the BRIC grant will be refunded?
Brett Thompson for the record. It's the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. And so that was it was released under the previous federal administration, and it was pulled back by current administration to be rewritten with whatever their guidance is. Once that is released, we will use those funds to start that fuel disruption study.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Assemblymember Gallant. Instead, we will have Assemblymember Jackson ask the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your services. I know you mentioned we need to prepare for state and federal issues. Could you elaborate on that and give some specifics?
Brett Thompson for the record. So it comes down to resiliency. So 2 parts. Preparedness is preparing our first responders and our emergency responders. I think we do that really, really well. I think that resilience is the next evolution of emergency management. It is how do we prepare communities to help take care of themselves. And a simple example is tangible skills. How many members, and I'll speak to my kids. So I have 3 boys. One boy can put together a motor. He can farm. He can hunt. He can take care of himself. The other 2 probably can't navigate from school to the house without Google. And so I give that as a kind of a funny example, but it's really true. How many members of our society just don't have simple survival skills? Stop the bleed, things like that. So those are very small examples, but those are things that people can do within their own communities. How many people belong to or have some sort of education in the community emergency response teams? So we can educate the public. We can help the public become more self-sufficient. And it's really about mitigating disasters. How do people help themselves in the midst of a disaster? I think that right now, there's a huge reliance on the government will come. And whichever version of the government you're talking about, your local, your state, or your federal version of that. And the reality is there just are not enough government resources to solve problems. And so a huge effort that we are undertaking here in the state is our public-private partnership and building that out. Because the reality is our box stores, our critical infrastructure partners, they're the ones that will most likely solve most of these problems for our public. We will help put that together and we will help synchronize resources. That's what I was alluding to.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Flanagan.
Good morning, and thank you for your presentation. Quick question on how you guys coordinate. You talked about the pass-through dollars and the collaborations. So as you prepare, can you talk to us a little bit about, is there statewide training? Do you bring the agencies together? Like sometimes I'll call it like JIC training. We've had that in certain areas down south. So what do you do like in that type of space to get everybody on the same page and get them more prepared?
Brett Thompson for the record. So there's a tremendous effort that happens within emergency management throughout the state for this and throughout the country. So most training within emergency management is standardized by FEMA standards, augmented by FEMA grant funds. And so within the state last year, I believe we trained approximately 49,000, not individuals, but 49,000 different classes occurred within the last year related to emergency management. They're all standardized. So whether it's your incident command system or your national incident management system, or it's emergency operation training, or it's hazard identification, mitigation training. There's a whole breadth of standardized training that occurs within the entire enterprise to ensure that we all are speaking the same language. We can all come together, whether you know each other or not, and you have a common set of educational pieces. That is really a huge undertaking of our preparedness and our training team.
Thank you. I do have a question. I believe emergency management has come a very long way in Nevada since 2017, and a lot of that has been focused within Clark County, especially your gaming and your resorts. And I'm wondering, you're talking about partnering because the federal government and state government needs to do that. Can you talk at all or any length about the public-private partnerships, learning from the private sector, especially their emergency management plans in casino gaming?
Brett Thompson, for the record, I cannot speak specifically, but I can speak generally. So several members of my team, 4 that I can think of right off the top of my head, actually come from the resort world. And they provide a tremendous perspective. So many members of the team have grown up in government and have a singular perspective. It's extremely important that we have multiple perspectives, and having those members that come from gaming industry, and they provide tremendous new ideas and new flavors of how we do business, and not just the public-private partnership piece of how we solve problems, but how do we adapt our own processes and procedures based on best practices that are occurring with our partners. And so I absolutely love that part of my team, and the more perspectives that we can bring in, the better. It doesn't necessarily specifically answer how they deal with that. I do know that I got to witness, I was down south when the Cybertruck event occurred, and I spent those 2 days on behalf of the governor with the Homeland Security Advisor at Metro, and watching them interact with our resort partners and the relationships that they already had in place, one phone call, one text group, and all of the partner agencies along the resorts were increasing security, and they were doing things that they had already pre-planned. It was awesome to watch.
Thank you. It's almost like an ecosystem, because there's a lot of military that go into Metro, and then a lot of retired Metro go into the resort industry, and now you're saying it kind of goes around. So thank you very much. Do we have any other questions from the committee members? If not, thank you very much. It was a very enlightening presentation. We will now move on to a bill hearing. Our first bill hearing is Assembly Bill 41, and I will now open that hearing on Assembly Bill 41, which revises provisions relating to the state militia. To present this measure, we have representatives from the Office of the Military. Please go ahead when you're ready and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Well, good morning, members of the Assembly. I am Daniel Waters. I'm the Adjutant General for the great state of Nevada.
Good morning, Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Cheryl Tyler, ASO for the Office of the Military. Thank you for allowing us to present AB 41. I'm sorry, am I good to go ahead? Okay. AB 41 enables the Adjutant General to appoint a State Assistant Adjutant General, in addition to the 2 federal Assistant Adjutant Generals we already have that are in the Nevada Army and Air National Guard. This also amends the NRS to reflect that the Nevada Army and Air Assistant Adjutant Generals may not necessarily be the Chief of Staffs for their respective branches. We are available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Dan Waters, if I may just provide some clarifying remarks. So just last week, I attended the Guard Senior Leader Conference. There's going to be some significant changes in the Department of Defense, significantly, I would say specifically, rather, in how many general officers there are. I've been asked to analyze the Nevada National Guard. We have 5 general officers. The Adjutant General is a 2-star general, 2 Assistant Adjutants General, 1 for Army, 1 for Air. An Air Component Commander is a 1-star, and a Land Component Commander. DoD-wide, this analysis will no doubt, in my mind, I should say, I would predict will probably be a reduction overall in the number of general officers. Will Nevada ultimately achieve that? I can't tell you that. But I would tell you that we're going to be looked at, there's no doubt about it. What this bill specifically would do, and I would ask that we actually, if we have the ability, is to adjust the language from an additional Assistant Adjutant General actually to a Deputy Adjutant General. Because if we have to go down, if we have to truncate, if we have to reduce the number of general officers I have, specifically, probably one of the component commanders, either the air or the land component commander, will also become the deputy adjutant general. And this would be specifically a state position, bridging the difference between the federal role of the National Guard and the state role of the National Guard. Currently, I am the only state employee, so whenever we do a state active duty, an emergency deployed within the state that's not necessarily funded or supported by the federal government, it falls on me alone. So in other words, if I'm out of town, if I happen to be on vacation, a federal asset, which we have the ability to do that right now, a federal asset then becomes the commander of the state forces. This bill specifically would give us that flexibility to have a state employee responsible for state response. Thank you.
Okay, committee, do we have questions? Our first question is from Assemblymember De Silva.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, General Waters, for being here today. It's always an honor.
Well, Semper Fi.
Semper Fi, Semper Fi. Quick question. So the new general position that we're creating here, the assistant, or not deputy, but assistant is the proper term. Is that what we're using now?
Dan Waters, for the record, the bill language right now says assistant. I would ask that that be changed to deputy. I have 2 assistant adjutants general right now.
Okay, and then a quick follow-up, Chair. So this individual would then be under your command, correct? And there wouldn't be any sort of federal sort of oversight. It would be an individual who's working for you as the Adjutant General of Nevada?
Dan Waters, for the record, yes, it would be a deputy to the Adjutant General. Currently, as the Adjutant General, this person would work directly for me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Now, I just want to clarify, if I can, Assemblyman, that we have the ability right now is this person is a state position. It's not funded, so it's title and its authority is what it comes down to. So there is no additional funding required for this. There's no additional manpower that's required on the state side. This would be existing manpower that's a federal general officer right now, giving them state authority.
Thank you for putting that on the record, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And looking at the bill, I'm not seeing where that additional change from assistant to deputy is in the bill, so will that be an amendment?
Well, I had the meeting last Friday, so unfortunately, Dan Waters, for the record, I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that. I've never seen that before, but that's a great technique. Dan Waters, for the record, because I attended the meeting last Friday, these are changes that are just now coming to light. So the bill obviously was put in several months ago with language that was applicable at the time. What I am saying is based on the current situation and the dynamics of the changing environment, especially within the Department of Defense, that language, if it could be, adjusted from assistant to deputy.
Thank you. So will you be putting in or drafting a friendly amendment to this bill?
Dan Waters, for the record, yes, ma'am. If the committee is open to that, yes, ma'am. That's exactly what we'll be doing.
Thank you so much for that. Our next question is from Assemblymember DeLong.
Thanks, Chair. The general actually already answered my question about transitioning from a federal to a state and whether that would affect the fiscal note.
Thank you. Committee members, do we have any other questions? I have a quick question just because I'm a visual learner. If you could just sort of explain, so you have the top guy, adjudicant, and then the 2, the Army, your Air National Guard, and then you have deputies, and one may or may not be chief of staff. Can you just kind of sketch that out a little bit so we have a better idea? Thank you.
Dan Waters, the Adjutant General, for the record. Madam Chair, what I will do is I will actually get you a diagram, because I'm a visual learner. I just flew back in, as a matter of fact, last night. And so in my mind, preparing for the committee hearing, that's what I wanted to bring to the table. What I would tell you right now is there's an Adjutant General as a 2-star position. That is a state employee that has federal authority. So I carry the general officer. I'm federally recognized as a general officer. All the assistant adjutants general and the land component commanders, those are federally recognized 1-stars in federal positions. They are not state employees. So there's no state authority necessarily. I am the only one that has that. So let's break it down to the Army and the Air. So there's what's called a land component commander for the Army, and then there's an assistant adjutant general for the Army, both 1-stars. From the Air Force side, there's an air component commander and an ATAG, or assistant adjutant general air. Because of the way the federal system is structured, the air component commander, one of the Air One stars is called the Chief of Staff from the federal aspect. From the Army aspect, the Chief of Staff is a colonel, an 06. So that's where we get the differences. I think when the legislation was written probably several years ago, it was primarily focused more towards the air and not understanding that the Army and the air have different languages and different ranks for different duties.
Thank you, that was very helpful, I appreciate it. Okay, if we don't have any additional questions, I will move on to testimony. Thank you. Again, testimony can be provided in person in Carson City via video conference in Las Vegas or over the phone. Further instructions for providing testimony on a bill can be found on the agenda. Each person has 2 minutes to provide testimony. Please state your name, spell your name, and please keep your remarks to the point. Thank you. Go ahead when you're ready.
Chair and committee members, my name is Andy Lee Pilbit. I'm the chairman of the United Veterans Legislative Council for Nevada. I represent 250,000 or so veterans in our state, and when you include their families, that's about 500,000 Nevadans. Anyway, we are fully in support of this upgrade and change. What you don't see often is all of the elements that have impacted our Guard over the last 25 years. For many decades, they didn't have to deal with this, but our Guard has become an active function of the federal military. So instead of this, we find that we have units constantly being deployed around the world from our Guard units. So I think they call that Title 10. Is that right, General?
That is, yes, sir.
They are moved to Title 10. So they're briefly, and we're learning that we have all of these functions that are under a single individual, meaning Adjutant General, and I agree with the Deputy Adjutant General. I am a combat commander from Vietnam, so I understand some of these elements, and it's very difficult to keep something in place and have a backup. And in the military, you have to have depth or you don't accomplish the missions. So the United Veterans Legislative Council supports this fully. I'm also the state commander for combat wounded veterans, and they support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in Carson City who wishes to provide testimony in support of AB 41? Seeing no one, we'll move to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas who would like to provide testimony in support of AB 41? Seeing no one, AVH will go on the phones. Is there anyone who wants to testify in support on AB 41?
To testify in support of AB 41, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Again, if you wish to testify in support, please press star 9. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. We will now move on to opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City who wishes to testify in opposition to AB 41? Seeing no one and seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH, is there anyone on the line in opposition?
To testify in opposition of AB 41, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Again, if you wish to testify in opposition, please press star 9. Chair, we have no callers wishing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. I'm moving on to neutral. Is there anyone in Carson City who wishes to testify in neutral on AB 41? Seeing no one and still seeing no one in Las Vegas, is there anyone on the phones, AVH?
To testify in neutral for AB 41, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Again, please press star 9. Chair, we have no callers for neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. General, did you want to make any final remarks? If you're good, I'm good. Thank you so much. I will now close. Have a great day. Thank you for coming. Close the hearing on AB 41, and we will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 81, which exempts the state of Nevada from provisions of federal law relating to daylight savings time. To present this measure, we have Assembly Member LaRue Hatch. Welcome to the Government Affairs Committee, and please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Considine, Vice Chair Nguyen, and the Committee on Government Affairs. I am Assembly Member Selena LaRue Hatch. In the interest of fairness, I will spell my name for the record. So Selena, LA space capital RUEHATCH. I know it's a doozy. But I represent Assembly District 25, which is in West Reno. And this morning, I am excited to present AB 81, also known as the Lock the Clock Act. This bill essentially exempts us from the federal requirements about daylight savings time and puts Nevada on permanent standard time. I'm going to walk you through the bill quickly because it is short, and then I will explain my reasoning for why I'm bringing this measure. So, AB 81, as I just said, literally exempts us from observing daylight savings time from the second Sunday of March each year, ending on the first Sunday of November each year. During that time period, we will observe standard time. Then you'll note I am bringing a small amendment. In the original bill, it says this act takes effect on July 1st, 2025. If the whole point is to stop us from changing clocks, it doesn't make sense for us to suddenly switch to standard time on July 1st. So instead, my amendment has this act taking effect on January 1st, 2026. So we will change the clocks one last time in November to standard time, and then we would not have to change the clocks from that point on. Now, you may be wondering, why am I bringing this legislation? Well, I hear about this issue from my constituents constantly. And in talking to other assembly members, it sounds like many of you probably also hear from your constituents about concerns over daylight savings time. And these are not just folks that are upset about losing an hour of sleep or having to change their clocks. There are documented negative health effects that come from observing daylight savings time and changing our clocks twice a year. We know that in the weeks following a clock change, there are worsened health impacts. Strokes, heart attacks go up, digestive issues increase, medical outcomes are worsened. And in fact, many health organizations endorse permanent standard time as being more natural, more in line with our circadian rhythm, and healthier for our bodies. Additionally, around clock changes, mental health issues worsen. Anxiety increases, depression increases. Permanent daylight savings time would actually increase seasonal depression and other issues related to darkness in the mornings. There are public safety issues. Car accidents go up. Workplace accidents go up when we change the clocks. And there are economic increases. We have measurable productivity decreases when we change the clocks. And while some argue that the clock changes are meant to save energy, we actually don't even save money on energy because the offset in light is outweighed by the increased demand for heating and cooling in the mornings and the evenings when we're on daylight savings time. So this bill is a way for us to immediately have positive impacts on our public health without us having to spend any money. And to me, that seems like a pretty good policy proposal. Now, I will absolutely stand for questions, but before I answer them, I want to head off just a couple of them. Some folks have asked, well, why can't we do permanent daylight savings time? Why are you doing permanent standard time? The answer is we are not allowed to do permanent daylight savings time. The federal government allows us to exempt ourselves and observe permanent standard time only. So if we want to stop changing the clocks, which is really the health issue, this is our only option for doing so. You may also ask, why have we not done this before if it's so common sense? Well, we have tried it multiple times, but previous bills have tied us to we'll change when California changes, or we'll change when the feds change. And in my opinion, we are the Nevada Legislature, and I don't think we can wait on anybody else to do what's right for our constituents. So this bill is simple and straightforward and an immediate fix. Some people argue that farmers and ranchers want this, but as someone who grew up on a ranch, let me tell you, the cows are getting up at the same time, no matter what the clock says. So this is not something that helps our agricultural producers. And for those folks that are worried, oh, well, we might be the only ones. we're not the only ones. Arizona and Hawaii already observe permanent standard time. They love it, from what I have heard talking to folks living in those areas. And there are in fact 30 states that are considering similar legislation currently, because as more and more evidence is coming out of the harms of daylight savings time, more and more states are responding to their constituent concerns. So with that, that is the bill. I tried to keep it short. Again, this is a bill that will have immediate positive health impacts and positive impacts on the quality of life of our constituents, and we don't have to spend a single dollar. So with that, Chair, I stand ready for your questions.
Thank you, Assemblymember, for the presentation. Questions from the committee? We will start with Assemblymember De Silva.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Assemblymember, for being here. As I said, you always lighten up the room every time you walk into any of these hearing rooms here. Quick, again, two-part question. First, the health concerns, especially the cardiac sort of related events that were on the rise during the change in time. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that and why there is such like consensus with all of our healthcare advocacy organizations throughout the country on supporting a bill like yours. And then also as a classroom teacher, I was wondering if you could also speak about some of the disruptions that we see in our classrooms, during the time change periods as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chair, may I go direct? Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Assemblymember LaRue Hatch for the record. I didn't need to get the sign. So for the heart portion of your question, there are documented increased cardiac arrests and cardiac events that happen both times we change the clock, whether it is forward or back. And that is why there are numerous medical associations that have endorsed permanent standard time. This includes the American Academy of Cardiovascular Sleep Medicine. It includes the American Medical Association, the American Association of Public Health Physicians, and a whole lot more that I'm happy to provide to the committee. But the medical consensus seems to be that this is a negative impact on our communities, and this is the fix for their health. For your second question about students, you and I see it every year, right? In our classrooms, students come in after these clock changes. They're tired. They're not as focused. Those of us that are parents know that our children are disrupted for weeks after this clock change. And it's not just anecdotal. There are actually studies to back up the loss of learning in students, the increase in anxiety, the increase in behavioral issues when they are having these severe disruptions to their sleep patterns.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Assemblymember Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I'd heard that we were looking at some federal legislation for this as well, that some of that might be coming through. I'm just curious if you have an update on where that might be, and then if you have any current updates on our neighboring states, where if they're currently having legislation come in, California, Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, any updates would be appreciated.
Thank you so much for the question. Assemblymember LaRue Hatch for the record. So yes, this is actually a bipartisan effort. The Trump administration has also expressed interest in ending this. There has been both Democrats and Republicans that think this is a policy we should end. I think we all know the speed at which the federal government moves. And so my argument is that while I hope the federal government sees that this policy needs to be changed, we can't wait for them. We need to enact something immediately for our constituents and hope that the federal government sees our example and catches up. As far as our neighbors, I have been working with other representatives in other states. We have a coalition of multi-states that talk about this issue. There's legislation moving through California currently, through Oregon, through Utah, and Arizona already has this. So our neighboring states are talking about this issue, and I am hopeful that multiple of our states will be able to move forward.
On the federal level, have they actually presented a bill, or they're just talking about it?
Assemblymember LaRue Hatch for the record. There has not been a bill so far, to my knowledge, of permanent standard time, but I do know it has been a discussion amongst the administration.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Flanagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assemblymember LaRue Hatch. I just want to make sure I'm clear on the timeline. You mentioned one more change, and then instead of becoming effective in July, would have been July of this year, you're saying January of next year. So we will change the daylight saving times in March, when spring, whatever we do this. And then in November, it would just stay where it is. but becomes statewide effective as of January of the next year? Just that, making sure, because it seems to me the timeline would be fine in July, considering we would have already made the change, and, okay.
Assemblymember LaRue Hatch for the record, so let me clarify. In November, and I think this year it's, or sorry, March 9th, we will shift to daylight savings time. If this bill became effective on July 1st, we would suddenly change the clocks again to go back to standard time. I would love for us to implement this before March 9th so that we don't have to observe another daylight savings time, but I just don't think that is possible with our legislative timeline. So we will observe one more period of daylight savings time, beginning on March 9th and lasting until November 2nd. If it's the committee's desire, we could make this effective on November 2nd. It doesn't really make a difference because November 2nd and January 1st are both during permanent standard time. So whenever this bill becomes adopted during our permanent standard time season, we would just not change the clocks. So we are due for 2 more clock changes, to answer your question, but that's simply because I can't implement this before our next daylight savings time approaches.
Can I have a quick follow-up, Madam Chair? I just wanted to make sure, because Arizona is always on the same time, which is where it's gonna place us, and they're an hour ahead of us. So when we change in March, we will catch up with the time that they're on. So we'll match up with that time Arizona's on, so it just seems like we're already gonna be in it, because we're gonna go forward. So I may be misunderstanding something, but we're already gonna go forward, so it seems like we could just stay there, since that's where we're going.
Assemblymember LaRue Hatch for the record. I understand, and the goal really is to stop changing the clocks, but we're not allowed to stay in permanent daylight savings time. When we go an hour forward, that is daylight savings time. So the feds won't allow us to just stay there. We'd have to shift back to permanent time, and then we can stay. And that's the federal restrictions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? I do have a question. We have received a lot. There's over a dozen exhibits just on the website. And I just want to be clear that I've received, or this committee has received an amendment. Is that the only amendment currently that you are accepting on this bill?
Assemblymember LaRue Hatch for the record. The amendment on the time change, or the implementation date, is the only amendment that I am accepting.
Thank you very much. And with no other questions, thank you for the presentation, and we will move on to testimony on the bill. Again, testimony can be provided in person in Carson City, video conference in Las Vegas, or by phone. Instructions on providing testimony can be found on the agenda. As I mentioned at the start of this meeting, we will set a 20-minute time limit for the periods of support, opposition, and neutral testimony, with each speaker having 2 minutes. To ensure as many people as possible can testify, feel free to say ditto if someone else has already covered your testimony. First, we will begin testimony in support of AB 1. And anyone in Carson City who would like to approach and provide testimony in support, please approach. Thank you. And begin when you're ready.
Hello, okay. Hi, my name's Annie Vong, ANNIEV as in Victor, ONG. For Cartwright NV Government Affairs, we're representing Nevada Public Health Association, or NPHA. They've submitted a letter, and we would just like to verbally acknowledge that. Seasonal time changes, as Assemblymember LaRue Hatch said, poses a risk for public health when it comes to motor vehicle crashes and cardiovascular events, and NPHA fully supports this bill. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Justice Forrest, spelled Justiceforest. I am the Administrative Assistant for the Nevada Association for the Education of Young Children, and we are strongly in support of AB 81 because of the reasons as mentioned by both Assemblymember LaRue Hatch and Assemblymember De Silva regarding the adverse effects of mental health of children, particularly mood swings, difficulty focusing, difficulties with concentration, and worse performance in schools that are caused by daylight savings time, as well as in particular the increase in traffic fatalities that results from drivers also suffering the same issues with sleep deprivation, mood swings, difficulties concentrating, etc. And for that, we support it not only for the mental health of our children, but for their safety in preventing traffic fatalities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Carson City who would like to testify in support? Seeing no one approach, we can go to Las Vegas, but I don't see anyone in Las Vegas right now. AVH, is there anyone on the line in support for AB 81?
To testify in support of AB 81, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Again, if you wish to testify in support, please press star 9.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you, committee. It's a little awkward not being new, but it's very good to be here. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is JP. First name is spelled J-A-Y. Last name is spelled T-E-A. I'm the president of the nonprofit Safe Standard Time in Arizona. I'm also the co-chair for the Coalition for Permanent Standard Time, a national group of 8 nonprofits for health and safety. And I'm here to ask for your support of Assembly Bill 81. Thank you to the Assemblywoman for bringing this forward. This bill can lock the clock as members wish in the quickest way possible, being that it's federally pre-approved, and in the safest, healthiest, and most lasting way possible, as proven by the lessons of history and of science. Daylight saving time is simply a mandate to wake earlier and to sleep less. When you spring your clock forward in a couple of weeks, your alarm will be sounding an hour earlier in the dark morning, and will do so an hour earlier every single day until you put it back to standard time. Over the long term, this deprives an average of 19 minutes less sleep every single night, and that leads to loss of life and loss of revenue here. And permanent daylight time would even cost more and be forcing people to work in the dark for half the year, which is why it's federally prohibited. Summer makes the days longer. Nothing the government does can change the length of the day. Permanent standard time is the natural clock set to the sun. 12 p.m. is high noon. It balances the morning and evening light, and that morning light is especially important for our sleep, our mood, our healthy, our safety, our education, our productivity, especially for school children, commuters, outdoor laborers, service personnel, those who need the morning light most. This is the opinion of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the American Academy of Psychology, the National Safety Council, even Bloomberg's editorial board. Arizona, Hawaii, the 5 territories, most nations have been doing this for incident. Mexico just a couple of years ago adopted permanent standard time. California, Oregon, Idaho, and many other states are looking at doing this, and I'm certain that the first one bravely steps forward. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have, but please support Assembly Bill 81, lock the clock in the quickest, safest, and healthiest, and most lasting way possible. Thanks again very much.
If you recently joined the call and would like to testify in support of AB 81, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no additional callers in support at this time.
Thank you. We will now move on to testimony in opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City who would like to testify in opposition to AB 81? Seeing no one coming forward and seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH, we're back to you if there's anyone willing or wishing to testify in opposition.
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 81, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Hello, my name is Vincent Valenti, Valenti. I'm asking the Assembly to move forward with Assembly Bill 81. I was trying to press to vote positive, but I wasn't able to get in. Allowing Nevada to remain on Pacific Standard Time year-round, living in Las Vegas, Pacific Standard Time would benefit people with small children and pets. It's very dangerous to walk pets and small children and elderly in the summer heat in Las Vegas until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. Sidewalks are scalding hot. Animals are trapped inside the entire day. Families with small children are unable to walk their pets because their children have to go to bed early. It makes no sense to have daylight until 9 o'clock when it's 115 degrees outside. On the flip side, switching to daylight savings time means that it's darker in the morning during spring to March, April, and May. People are walking their pets before going to work, and they're unable to see predators like coyotes, bobcats, and owls, which are prominent in Northwest Las Vegas, putting the owners and the pets at risk. Please let us join Arizona in keeping Pacific Standard Time year-round. Thank you, Assembly Member Hatch, for introducing the bill and for considering my response.
Thank you very much. We will move this testimony in support, but we will continue with testimony in opposition, AVH.
Hello. My name is Ron Ariel. I'm a pediatrician. I'm calling not specifically to say that this is definitely a bad idea, but to say that this is a little premature. Now, Assemblywoman Hatch has done a lot of good work here and brought in, has done a lot of homework, and I appreciate that. But a little premature to have this bill move forward at this time, because I don't think she's talked to all of the stakeholders that need to be involved in, such as tribal chiefs, the resort and casino community, other businesses, and as well as reviewing the scientific studies. I mean, you have documented health effects when the time springs forward, but then you also have a decrease in those effects when the time springs back again. Additionally, there are studies from Vivint and the Brookings Institution showing that robberies and violent crime tend to spike when daylight savings time ends. And so the presence of daylight savings times, especially in the summer months, and we are dependent on the resort industry and the casino industry, it actually reduces crime during the evening hours. So what I'm suggesting, and I submitted an amendment proposal. I understand the Assemblywoman doesn't want it, but I want it, and I'd like to persuade you to adopt it, to create a commission to study the issue in Nevada and make sure to include all the stakeholders that I mentioned in that amendment, and put together a study that the governor would there was a meta-analysis of all the studies and come to a consensus of what we should do. And then the 2027 legislature can act on it. It's a little premature, a little rash to do it now, but with a good study and a commission creating a consensus, then we can accept whatever that consensus is. The 2027 legislature can move forward. We can't necessarily count on the federal government or other states, and we need to do what's good for Nevada. And I'm not saying that this is a bad idea. I'm just saying let's
Mr.
do.
Ariel, but your 2
let's study.
minutes, if you can wrap up, your 2 minutes have
Okay.
ended.
Yeah. Okay. But that's it in a nutshell. And I thank you very much.
Good morning, Chair. This is Dora Martinez, and I apologize. I was still having trouble to unmute when it was for both positive for AB 81. So as a visually impaired mom and have been babysitting kids with autism, we appreciate Assembly Member LaRue Hatch for bringing this forward, and I hope that you guys can approve it and move it forward, because it's the right thing to do. And thank you so much.
Thank you. We will move that testimony to support. AVH, are there any other calls for opposition?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. We have no additional callers at this time.
Thank you. We will now move to neutral. Is there anyone here in Carson City who wishes to testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 81? Seeing no one approach and still no one in Las Vegas, AVH, we're back with you. Is there anyone on the phone to testify in neutral?
The public line is open and working. We have no callers for neutral at this time.
Thank you. Would the presenter like to make any final remarks? Go right ahead.
Member LaRue Hatch, for the record, thank you so much for hearing this morning. I just wanted to get on the record that I have spoken to many, many stakeholders about this issue, and none of them, including the ones that were listed in the call, expressed any concerns. And in fact, I've had no formal opposition that has reached out about this. And I think the fact that many ordinary folks, non-lobbyists, have sent in support testimony and called in this morning shows how popular this is among our constituents. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I will now close the hearing on AB 81. We will now move into a BDR introduction. We will introduce BDR number 36398, which revises provisions relating to the Nevada National Guard. Remember, voting in favor of introducing a BDR does not imply a commitment to supporting the measure later. All this action does is to allow the BDR to become a bill and enter the legislative hearing process. I will now entertain a motion to introduce BDR number 36398.
I move to approve. Oh, wait. So moved.
Assembly Member Nguyen made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Assembly Member Carter. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. We will now move to public comment. As a reminder, members of the public can provide public comment in person or telephonically and may submit public comment up to 24 hours after the meeting. Instructions for providing public comment can be found on the agenda. To provide public comment telephonically, dial 888-475-4499. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, enter 857-3796-8255, and then press pound when prompted for a participant ID. Each person will have 2 minutes to provide testimony. You may also submit written public testimony, public comment to the committee up to 24 hours after the hearing. Please remember to clearly state and spell your name for the record. Is there any public comment here in Carson City? Seeing no one. Las Vegas, still seeing no one. AVH, is there anyone on the line for public comment?
If you wish to provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers for public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 25th at 8 a.m. in room 4100. That concludes our meeting for today. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.